We often hear that saying, power corrupts. It's almost, etched into our collective consciousness. A simple truth, maybe, but is it really the whole story?
It's a really compelling question. And honestly, a lot of the latest research challenges that idea head on.
Yeah.
That simple cliche, well, it's powerful, sure, but it just doesn't capture the incredible complexity we're now starting to uncover.
Absolutely. And, well, that's our mission today. We're going on a deep dive into this really intricate world of power.
Okay.
We're going to explore what the research tells us about how power doesn't just affect our outward actions,
Right.
but how it physically changes our brains, influences our ethical decisions, shapes leadership styles, well, within organizations, and why it can sometimes lead to these surprising outcomes that can be incredibly destructive, but also sometimes remarkably constructive.
And to unpack all of this for you, we've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources. We'll be drawing on things like qualitative analyses of ethical situations, case studies of corporate abuse, public service abuse.
The real world stuff.
Exactly. Plus some groundbreaking neuroscience, insights from classic psychological experiments like, the Stanford prison experiment.
Ah, yes, that one.
And even research into the cognitive biases that often affect political behavior.
Okay, so get ready to challenge some assumptions with us. Now, when we talk about power, it's not just about a fancy title or a corner office, is it?
No, not at all. Power is, well, it's fundamental to society. It's constantly shaping how we interact.
Think about it. History itself, so much of it is written from the perspective of those in power.
That's absolutely right. Whether you look at ancient texts or, modern analyses, power is just ubiquitous. It dictates how conflicts get framed, how resources are distributed.
Fundamentally, how people relate to each other.
Exactly.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, maybe a little unsettling. Recent studies, they reveal that power doesn't just affect our outward behavior. It fundamentally changes how we think, feel, and interpret the world, like at a neurological level.
It literally rewires parts of our brain. And what's fascinating here is how quickly these shifts can happen.
Really?
Yeah, for instance, a 2006 study, Galinsky and colleagues, they showed this by priming participants for power. Maybe just having them write, "I am very powerful." Simple stuff.
Okay.
Then they asked them to draw an E on their forehead. And the powerful individuals, they tended to draw it so they could read it.
So someone looking at them could read it?
Precisely. While others drew it for others to read. It's a small thing, but a clear, immediate sign of reduced perspective taking.
And it goes beyond just drawing a letter, right? Power can actually reduce social accuracy, make people rely too much on their own viewpoint.
Yes, exactly. Some studies even suggest it can cause powerful individuals to literally perceive others as physically shorter than they actually are.
Wow. That's quite a distortion.
It is. And it's not just a brain quirk. It helps explain why powerful leaders can sometimes seem so out of touch. They might literally be failing to see people properly.
Which obviously leads to poor decisions.
Certainly. And this distortion, it extends to empathy too. Research from Hojavin and colleagues in 2014, it showed that power reduces the effectiveness of mirror neurons.
Okay. Remind us, mirror neurons are the empathy bits of the brain.
Essentially, yeah. They fire when we do something and when we see someone else do it. It's key to understanding others' experiences, their emotions. So if they're less effective...
Powerful people literally become less sensitive to others' feelings and perspectives.
That's what the research suggests, less sensitivity.
So if power dampens empathy, that sounds like a perfect recipe for moral hypocrisy. The rules for thee but not for me thing.
Indeed. Power definitely increases the likelihood of that mindset. If I do it, it's fine, but if you do it, it's wrong. And in extreme cases, this can slide towards dehumanization, which historically is a really dangerous precursor to violence or oppression. Our sources even draw a sobering analogy. They note that people primed for power can sometimes show behaviors similar to individuals with certain types of brain damage.
Like what?
Like insensitivity, reduced empathy, poor judgment. It's quite stark.
So, considering these neurological shifts, it really brings us to psychologist Dr. Kellner's idea, doesn't it? The power paradox.
Exactly. The very qualities that often help us get power, like sharing, looking out for others, those are the very things we tend to lose once we have it.
It's a paradox. Power simplifies thinking, makes people more self-interested, more likely to interrupt, speak out of turn.
Even humiliate others in some cases. It's a real trap.
Which leads us right into the surprising kind of dual nature of power.
Right. The idea that power is inherently corrupting, it's, as we said, a cliche. But it's not the full picture.
Okay.
Research suggests power can both corrupt and morally elevate people. The key insight seems to be that power isn't like a moral switch. It's more like a magnifying glass.
A magnifying glass. How so?
Well, it doesn't automatically make you good or bad. It intensifies the tendencies, good or bad, that are already there, or maybe triggered by the situation.
Ah, I see.
And this duality seems to hinge on two crucial factors.
Yeah.
Behavioral disinhibition and heightened self-focus.
Okay, let's dig into behavioral disinhibition first. So basically, power acts like a key, unlocking our internal brakes.
That's a good way to put it. It frees us from the usual constraints on behavior. Now, on the immoral side, this can definitely unchain immoral desires.
Like what?
Increased infidelity, more traffic violations, especially, interestingly, in expensive cars.
Figures.
Stealing, cheating, general norm breaking. It can even reduce the stress or guilt people normally feel when lying.
So it makes them better liars, functionally speaking.
In a way, yes. Less internal friction. And this disinhibition also fuels that hypocrisy we talked about, condemning others for things they do themselves.
But you said there's a twist. It's not all bad.
Exactly. Here's the surprising part. Power-induced disinhibition can also reinforce positive, situation-induced moral tendencies.
How does that work?
Well, for example, in these public goods dilemmas, where your self-interest clashes with the group's interest, power can actually increase altruism in some contexts.
Really?
Yeah, it can magnify inherent moral inclinations. So if someone has a strong moral identity to begin with, power might make them act more altruistically.
Okay.
And power can also promote utilitarian choices. By freeing people from maybe rigid adherence to certain moral codes, it allows them to calculate outcomes more rationally, perhaps focusing on the greatest good for the greatest number.
That's fascinating. So it's not just acting on bad impulses, but potentially enabling good ones, too. Okay, what about the second factor? Heightened self-focus. This one sounds maybe less positive.
Generally, yes. On the moral side, power leads people to focus much more on themselves, their own needs.
We see that.
Absolutely. It manifests as taking more than your fair share. Remember the classic Cookie Monster study?
Vaguely. Remind me.
Leaders in a group were observed, and they literally ate more cookies than others, and often did so more messily, left more crumbs.
Huh. The little things tell a story.
They do. And who hasn't seen that play out? The person who always takes the biggest slice, the driver cutting you off. It's that subtle entitlement.
Right.
And this self-focus also links to reduced empathy, less compassion. It can even lead powerful people to objectify or dehumanize others.
So more likely to be rude, have affairs, maybe shoplift or drive recklessly.
The research suggests correlations there, yes. Higher power correlates with higher likelihood of those behaviors.
This paints a pretty grim picture for self-focus. It almost makes you wonder if there's any upside. Can focusing inward when you have power ever lead to good ethical outcomes? Seems counterintuitive.
It is counterintuitive, but here's where it gets, well, complicated.
Okay.
Powerful individuals are apparently less likely to engage in unethical behavior that benefits others compared to those with less power.
Wait, say that again. Less likely to be unethical for others.
Right. So while power increases selfishness, doing bad things for yourself, it doesn't seem to unilaterally increase immorality done to help someone else.
Huh. That's a subtle distinction.
It is. And heightened self-focus can also, interestingly, shield the powerful from conformity pressure.
Meaning?
Meaning they might be more likely to express their true opinions, even if it goes against the group consensus. So it's not simply good or bad, it redirects focus. But sometimes that leads to an independent, maybe even principled stand.
Okay, so power has this dual nature. It messes with our brains, amplifies self-interest. How do we navigate this in real-world organizations? What does ethical leadership even look like when you're wielding this double-edged sword?
Well, ethical leadership, at its core, is about making decisions guided by strong ethical values. It's about respecting rules, prioritizing the well-being of others, consistently.
It's like a process.
It is. Leaders need to first recognize a moral issue, then analyze their duties and the consequences, form a moral intention, and finally, take ethical action. It's deliberate.
And leadership styles must play a role here, right? Like the classic autocratic style. Leader holds all the cards.
Right, the autocratic style. All control, no consultation. And, not surprisingly, that often leads to higher absenteeism, more turnover. People don't feel heard.
Then there's the opposite, maybe. Democratic style.
Yes, democratic leadership. That's about meaningful engagement, shared decisions. The leader is more like a coach, gathering info, empowering people. Usually better relations, often more robust decisions too.
And what about laissez-faire, the really hands-off approach?
Laissez-faire, yeah. Minimal involvement, employees figure it out themselves. But that can actually hinder trust, strangely enough. Lack of clear direction can leave people feeling adrift.
Okay, so different styles. But which one is best for ethics?
The research points pretty strongly towards transformational leadership being the most successful in fostering ethical decision-making.
Transformational? What does that involve?
Transformational leaders work to strengthen employees' values, their ethics, their motivation. They inspire a shared moral vision by promoting intellectual stimulation, encouraging new ways of thinking, providing individual consideration, caring about people as individuals, and through inspirational motivation. They essentially try to lift everyone up, ethically speaking. Leads to better ethical climates, even less staff fatigue.
That sounds ideal, but it almost feels like it's not just the style. Is it possible that the leader's own character matters more?
I think that's exactly what the core finding suggests. While styles provide a framework, ethical decision-making seems more profoundly influenced by the leader's individual personality, their values, their standards.
So it's less about the playbook and more about the player.
Precisely. The best leaders are often agile. They adapt their approach based on the situation. They might use models like the Vroom-Yet-Njago model to figure out the best strategy considering impact, collaboration needs, time pressure.
So it's about being principled and flexible.
Exactly. Not just rigidly sticking to one style.
Okay, so we've looked at the brain, the dual nature leadership theory. But the real test is the real world, right? And unfortunately, that's where we see so many examples of power going wrong. Abuse of power isn't just theoretical.
No, sadly, it's quite common in contemporary organizations. One striking example is when weak superiors deliberately keep the talent pool thin.
How do you mean?
They avoid hiring highly qualified people who might threaten their own status. It's purely self-preservation, not what's best for the company.
Wow. And we've certainly seen organizations use illegal tactics against unions, haven't we?
Oh, yes. Threatening job losses, plant closures,
Yeah.
maybe promising benefits if people vote against the union, assigning harder tasks to union supporters, direct abuse of authority to maintain control.
And then there are the huge financial scandals. Enron is the classic case.
Absolutely. Officers manipulating financial statements, misleading investors, led to the company's collapse, massive erosion of public trust. A stark reminder of power completely unchecked.
And this isn't just a corporate problem. It can become an epidemic across all sectors. There's that rim quote from a former Mexico City police chief.
Right, saying something like, "For as long as I can remember, the police has harmed everyone with some act of corruption or inefficiency or inability." Just paints a picture of systemic failure rooted in abuse of power.
And even in areas you might not expect, like safety reporting, that ABC engineering case.
Yes, manipulating safety reports. They were found to have discharged injured contract workers after they recovered just to keep their safety record looking clean.
Putting reputation above people's rights and well-being.
Exactly. Violating workers' rights for the sake of appearances.
So it's not just explicit actions, is it? Power seems to intertwine with our cognitive biases, too, those mental shortcuts. They can really warp political decisions, especially.
That's right. Particularly when people try to impose their own moralistic values on others, regardless of the consequences or what others actually prefer.
How does that play out?
Well, these values are often seen as absolute, protected from trade-offs.
Yeah.
Someone might oppose, say, homosexuality or certain drug use, believing their values are just inherently better.
Right.
And they often show belief overkill, claiming these values lead to better consequences, even when the evidence doesn't support that for everyone involved. It can lead to policies based more on moral judgment than practical good.
This idea of protected values, or PVs, seems crucial here.
It is. These are values people consider absolute. No amount of benefit justifies sacrificing them. Think of maybe destroying a pristine rainforest for someone with that PV. No economic gain makes it okay.
And they're often insensitive to quantity, you said?
Often, yes. Destroying a small bit is as bad as destroying a large bit. And these PVs can be kind of unreflective overgeneralizations. People might impose them even when they know the consequences are worse for others. It's about the principle, no matter the cost.
And then there's parochialism. What's that?
Parochialism is basically favoring your own in-group. Your team, your party, your nation. Even if helping your group makes the total situation worse for everyone, including other groups.
People feel it's their duty to vote for their group's interest.
Often, yes. Even if it reduces the overall societal good, there's this illusion of morality as self-interest. People convince themselves what helps my group automatically helps me, or what helps my group is the right thing to do, period. Group loyalty trumps a broader benefit.
Speaking of how situations can just completely warp behavior,
Yeah.
we have to talk about the Stanford prison experiment.
Ah, yes, a landmark controversial stuff.
Set the scene for us.
Yeah.
1971, Philip Zimbardo.
Right. He wanted to know, is prison brutality due to sadistic personalities, or is it the environment itself? So he took college students, randomly assigned them roles, prisoners or guards, in a mock prison.
And the prisoners were de-individuated. Numbers, uniform.
Exactly. Numbers, smocks, caps.
Yeah.
Emphasizing the situational forces over individuality. Simple setup, but the result?
Were devastating, right?
Absolutely stark. The experiment was supposed to run for 2 weeks. They had to stop it after just 6 days.
Why? What happened so quickly?
The guards rapidly became authoritarian, abusive. Some seemed to really relish the power, and the prisoners became submissive, distressed. Some had emotional breakdowns. It showed how fast power, even simulated power, could corrupt, and how quickly people could fall into prescribed roles.
It's such a powerful demonstration of situational forces, isn't it? How they can just override personality, leading good, normal people to act in these surprisingly brutal or totally submissive ways.
Definitely. Concepts like de-individuation, losing your personal identity in the group role, and learned helplessness among the prisoners helped explain those rapid psychological shifts. Context can be incredibly powerful.
But it wasn't without problems, ethically speaking.
Oh, absolutely not. It raised huge ethical concerns. It was a major factor in developing stricter ethical guidelines for psychological research. The APA later prohibited similar simulations with human subjects.
And Zimbardo himself.
He acknowledged his own role got blurred. He was acting as prison superintendent, which impacted his objectivity as the lead researcher. It's a case study not just in power, but also in the ethics of studying power.
And wasn't there a counterpoint study later? The BBC prison study offered a different view?
Yes, a very important counterpoint in 2002. In that study, the researchers didn't give the guards explicit instructions to be authoritarian.
And the result?
The guards didn't uniformly become cruel. And interestingly, the prisoners actually banded together, showed solidarity.
So what does that suggest?
It suggests maybe it's not inevitable. Maybe explicit cues or a social context that condones aggression are needed. It might not be that people just naturally slip into sadism when given power. It adds crucial nuance. Perhaps it's power plus permission or instruction.
Okay, so with all these challenges, these potentials for power to go really wrong, how do we counteract corruption? How do we cultivate positive power? We've seen it can distort the mind, unlock behaviors, lead to that power paradox. How do we build safeguards?
Well, organizations can implement several really crucial safeguards. Things like strong corporate governance practices, meaning increasing the number of independent directors on boards, establishing separate audit and corporate governance committees, maybe separating the CEO and board chair roles. It's all about balancing control, ensuring diverse oversight.
Makes sense. What else?
Transparency and protection are key. Introducing clear grievance procedures, strong whistleblower protection programs.
So people can report abuse without fear.
Exactly. And robust audit systems, audit trails for decisions. It's about building systems where power isn't exercised in secret, where people are accountable.
And just simple checks and balances?
Yes. Things like job rotation for managers, so no one gets too engulfed in the position of power, as one source put it. Establishing a strong check and balance between executive and non-executive board members. It's about distributing power, preventing it from consolidating too much.
Okay, those are structural fixes. What about psychological interventions? Things we can do on a more individual or interpersonal level?
Accountability is huge, making powerful individuals accountable for their decisions, especially requiring them to explain their process. Their reasoning encourages them to consider others' interests, act less self-servingly.
Just knowing you have to justify yourself makes a difference.
It really seems to.
Yeah.
Even the subtle sense of being watched. Studies have used things as simple as dots arranged like a face can lead to less greedy, more ethical behavior.
Wow.
And awareness of your reputation. Knowing that your actions are seen and judged promotes cooperation, more noble actions for the greater good. Awareness seems to activate a different mode of thinking.
That's powerful. And perspective taking, which power seems to diminish that, must be critical to actively cultivate.
Absolutely critical. When you combine power with deliberate perspective taking, it leads to more prosocial behavior, fairer treatment of others.
How might that look practically?
It could mean more candid, but also more respectful and sensitive communication. Even in really difficult situations, like employee layoffs, it's about actively trying to see it from their viewpoint, even when your brain isn't automatically pushing you to do so.
And finally, there is that distinction in how power is felt, responsibility versus control.
Yes, that's important. Research indicates that feeling a sense of power responsibility, feeling you have power for others, or to do good positively influences prosocial behavior.
Whereas,
Whereas just feeling a sense of power control, power over others or situations can actually have a negative impact. So cultivating that sense of responsibility is key.
how do you do that?
One way might be through abstract thinking,
Yeah.
increasing your construal level thinking more abstractly about the bigger picture, long-term consequences, values, rather than just immediate details and games.
So moving from what can I do with this power to what should I do with this power?
Exactly. That abstract mindset seems to positively moderate the sense of power or responsibility, encouraging more prosocial actions from those with influence.
What a journey. We've really navigated the intricate landscape of power today, seen how it influences our brains, shapes leadership, how it can corrupt and inspire.
We really have. We've uncovered some deep-seated psychological mechanisms and looked at the real-world implications from boardrooms to politics.
And what really stands out, I think, is that constant tension, the tension between individual self-interest and the greater good, which power seems to just magnify.
It's a fundamental paradox of human nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
This force that can bring out our absolute worst or potentially elevate us to our best.
So the final question really is for you listening. What does this all mean for you? Whether you're in a position of authority right now, or maybe you will be, or maybe you're just observing the world around you, what responsibility do you have? A responsibility to understand these complex dynamics, to advocate for structures that encourage positive power. How can we, collectively cultivate that shared sense of responsibility that gets us beyond our own narrow interests, moves us closer to, well, truly better outcomes for everyone?
It's a profound question.
Maybe just think, what small act of perspective taking can you consciously perform today just to try and rebalance those scales? Even a little, something to ponder.